The Middle East is once again at the center of global attention, as Israel and Hamas have agreed to the first phase of a ceasefire plan in Gaza. On the surface, this development looks like a breakthrough, but when we look closer, the reality is far more complicated. The ceasefire is temporary, fragile, and shaped more by outside pressure than by real willingness from either side to stop the war. It is important to break through the noise, examine the facts, and understand what this agreement really means for the people of Gaza, for Israel, and for the wider Middle East. The first fact is that this is not a permanent truce but a limited pause in fighting. Reports confirm that the deal includes a short halt to military operations, the exchange of some hostages and prisoners, and the entry of limited humanitarian aid. While the headlines frame this as a path to peace, history shows otherwise. Almost every ceasefire between Israel and Hamas over the past 2 decades has collapsed within days or weeks. This deal is being called Phase 1, which already suggests that it is not final and that new negotiations or further conflict may follow. The second fact is that this agreement was not directly negotiated between Israel and Hamas. Both sides officially refused to recognize each other, so mediators played the key role. Qatar, Egypt, and the United States pushed hard for this deal, while the United Nations provided support. Without their intervention, it is unlikely that even this fragile ceasefire would exist. The involvement of these mediators is also strategic. Egypt fears instability on its border. Qatar wants to maintain its role as a regional power broker, and the United States seeks to cool down the conflict as global criticism of Israel's actions grows stronger. At the same time, misinformation about this ceasefire is spreading quickly. Some outlets report that peace is finally within reach, but this is misleading. Both Israel and Hamas view this pause in very different ways. For Israel, it is a tactical break, a way to release hostages while maintaining the option of resuming its operations later. For Hamas, it is a chance to ease the suffering in Gaza, gain some political legitimacy, and regroup militarily. Neither side sees this as the final step. Another myth is that the opening of humanitarian corridors will solve the crisis in Gaza. The truth is that the aid allowed in is far smaller than what is actually needed. Gaza requires thousands of trucks of food, medicine, and fuel, but only a limited number will be permitted. The humanitarian catastrophe continues despite the headlines of relief. The political reactions to this agreement also reveal deep divisions. Israel's leadership insists that the ceasefire is only a pause, promising its citizens that the campaign against Hamas will continue. Hamas portrays the deal as a sign of resistance and survival. In the Arab world, reactions are mixed. Qatar and Egypt claim credit for mediation, while Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states remain cautious. Meanwhile, Iran continues to back Hamas and warns Israel against further escalation. On the international stage, the United States and European powers present the ceasefire as a diplomatic success, but critics argue that Western nations continue to enable Israel militarily while claiming to promote peace. For civilians in Gaza, the reality remains grim. Tens of thousands have been killed since the war escalated, with women and children making up a large portion of the victims. The vast majority of the population has been displaced, with many living in overcrowded shelters that lack clean water, electricity, and medical supplies. Hospitals are overwhelmed, and doctors report that they are forced to perform surgeries without anesthesia or proper equipment. Even during the ceasefire, the flow of aid is not nearly enough to meet the scale of need. The world may hear words like pause and relief, but for families on the ground, survival remains uncertain. These developments in Gaza cannot be separated from the wider Middle East situation. The war has already triggered broader tensions, clashes along the Lebanon-Israel border, missile launches from Yemen, and rising rhetoric from Iran. The conflict also complicates the Abraham Accords and the normalization efforts between Israel and Arab states. Countries like Saudi Arabia, which had been moving closer to Israel before the war, are now rethinking their position under pressure from public opinion in the Muslim world. Meanwhile, Turkey and other regional actors try to balance diplomacy with their own political agendas. In short, the Gaza ceasefire is not just about Israel and Hamas, it is shaping the strategic landscape of the entire Middle East. At the United Nations, repeated calls for a permanent ceasefire have been blocked, with the United States using its veto power to shield Israel. This has created a sharp divide in global politics. On one side are countries in Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America demanding an end to the violence. On the other are Washington and its allies who continue to frame the war as Israel's right to defend itself. This global split weakens the credibility of international institutions and raises the risk that the conflict could expand into a larger regional war. When we examine all these facts, the conclusion becomes clear. The first phase of the Gaza ceasefire is not the beginning of peace, but rather a fragile pause driven by external pressure. It provides some relief but no resolution. For Israel, it is a tactical maneuver. For Hamas, it is survival. For the people of Gaza, it is a momentary breath amid devastation. For the region, it is a reminder that the deeper issues of occupation, blockade, and political recognition remain unresolved. Unless these core problems are addressed, history tells us this ceasefire will be just another pause before the violence resumes. The world is watching closely, and the question is not whether this truce will hold. History suggests it will not for long, but whether international powers will finally commit to addressing the root causes of the conflict. Without that, Gaza's suffering will continue, Israel's security concerns will remain, and the Middle East will remain locked in a cycle of war and instability. Thank you for watching Global Worldview. If you found this analysis helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more detailed breakdowns of world events.